We have an instinctive recoil from the thought of slavery. How did the Torah institute it as an acceptable institution?
The concept of slavery, as we tend to assume it to be in the Torah, is often misconstrued. It doesn't talk about the idea of having slaves in the way we conjure up the images of somebody slave laboring, you standing over them with a whip, etc. The notion of being a servant, which is the more appropriate translation, is when you choose to go work for somebody. That is to say, you choose to sell yourself, as it were, as a servant to work for someone. Or, in a rare instance, where you might have stolen from somebody and don't have the means with which to repay. So in the first instance, the Beth Din will decide that you should work for that person for a period of time. But Torah law, Code of Jewish law, is replete with so many rules and regulations of the way and the dignity with which you are supposed to treat that particular person who is working for you. It's not slavery in the conventional sense as we understand it from the American model or other such like models going back however many years. It is being a servant, and being a servant whose respect and dignity is maintained and they are treated throughout most appropriately.
Also, one of the concepts in being a bondsman, as Rabbi Schochet mentioned, is if somebody steals something. What happens in the United States and other Western countries today, if you steal something, you go off into prison. Usually your family ends up destitute, you end up being surrounded by very unproductive people, and you waste your time. Here you have to pay back either 2 times or 4 times or 5 times the value of the item you stole. Your labor is sold in advance up to a period of 6 years, and instead of being cut away from your family, the punishment you receiving is one of being a bondsman. So we see here a radical different concept in punishment for when people do acts of immoral acts of stealing of one to another. In Judaism in general, we did not support the idea of a jail, but being sold as a bondsman, being sold in this kind of way. Your labor was being sold. This was also a way of helping you pay back what you stole and come back into society and not just wasting those years in prison.
One further point. They say Beethoven, when he wrote music, he wrote such beautiful music, it was more advanced than the instruments they had in his day, and he helped push the development of building instruments better because of his music. They had to live up to what he wrote. The Torah does that often. The Torah has institutions and mitzvot that were way ahead of society of its time. For example, polygamy. Polygamy in the Torah is permitted, but if you read the text of the Torah, you see the Torah doesn't like it. It's trying to destroy that institution. That's not how God created the world. In every instance in the Torah where there's a polygamous marriage, the Torah makes sure to tell us it did not work out well. There's no exception to that. The only good marriages in the Torah are the marriages that don't have polygamy. So you see an institution, but the Torah is working with a vision to destroy it. Torah does the same thing with slavery. Torah was given into a world of slavery, but it created institutions to destroy it. Shabbat itself, 1 day in 7. If you allow everybody to be free and do what they want, what Shabbos says an animal can't even work for you on Shabbat, that destroys slavery. 1 day in 7, 24 hours, where a person is their own master, destroys slavery. So there are many instances where Torah helps to push the world, but it takes time.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.